I'm Maranda, St. Nicolle, part of the environment team in the Diocese of Oxford, working on our environment program along with colleagues in the mission department and the DAC. I work primarily on net zero aspects of our program, and I'm going to be talking today about how we're using church energy audits to help churches take climate action. And huge thanks to Jackie Davies, our program manager, and Liz Kitch, our senior churches officer, as well as our partners at Inspired Efficiency for their input. So as in all dioceses, our environment program is using eco-church and other resources to help churches engage in many different forms of creation care, learning about science and theology, caring for buildings and land, worship, daily life, and advocacy. But early on, we identified helping churches make their buildings more efficient as a top priority. There were several imperatives. The size of churches' contribution to our footprint, you can see that in the light violet. The enormous mission potential in witnessing to our concern through our very public buildings, and the possibility for collective action on church buildings to inspire individual action among congregants. But we also identified a major obstacle to action, this. Every church's journey is different, and with complex historic buildings, you can't just Google how to get a grade 1 listed church to net zero. People needed trusted, tailored advice, preferably from someone who wasn't trying to sell them something, but they didn't know where to find it. So to deal with the need for personalized advice, we started an energy audit program, formed in partnership with Trust for Oxfordshire's Environment and Inspired Efficiency. This program offers audits on a subsidized basis at a cost to the church of £150, which they can recoup through a grant to help them fund implementation of audit recommendations. Our pilot began in December 2018. We've audited about 80 churches since then, including the lockdown hiatus, and we hope to scale up considerably in the coming year. Many of you will be very familiar with the audit process, but for those who aren't, basically, churches apply with data about the building's size, usage, and energy usage, and also, if they're planning new works, something about their plans. The auditors take this information and do a site survey, talking with the church contacts to get further details. They then provide a report that helps churches compare their energy use to others, breaks down where the energy is being used, and gives a series of costed recommendations to improve efficiency. These include the costs, the estimated annual savings and payback time, the energy savings, and the carbon savings, which churches have found incredibly helpful. I often also add, when I'm writing to churches with the report, information on funding. As our drive towards net zero has become clearer, Inspired Efficiency and the Diocese have also introduced another element. Each church now gets its own path to net zero, with the costed recommendations placed in a sequence. This has 3 benefits. It embeds the concept of working towards net zero, shows how it can be achieved, and inspires churches to plan holistically. Our follow-up shows that the recommendations and plans have helped churches at every level, from the smaller churches to those undertaking large projects. On those which have primarily behavior change questions, my own favorite was this church, where the audit showed that they could save about 42% of their energy use simply by flipping the switch on some unneeded vestry heating. They were so enthusiastic, they actually asked the auditor to disable the switch on the spot. The auditors have also helped churches feel confident and undertake capital improvements from small to large. An audit showed that switching to LEDs would reduce this church's electricity use by about 1/3, but the church was nervous. So the auditor gave them a link to show them the precise type of lamps that they needed, and they've just put in their orders for new LEDs. On a larger scale, the pathway to net zero I showed earlier was from this church, and they just got in touch to tell us that following the auditor's report and subsequent discussions with him, they were preparing plans to replace their boiler with electric under pew heating. not something that had been their original plan, but definitely the most appropriate. And for churches that are the most committed, the audit can help them heighten their ambition. This small rural church was already close to net zero anyway, but the auditor recommended solar PV to get them the final step and gave them details of how the project could be undertaken. They're thrilled, and the plans are going to be going to the PCC. But the audits don't just help individual churches. As we move forward, analysis of the audits is also helping us as a diocese, DAC, and environment program better to focus our resources and support. So what does this mean for our next steps? To start with, I just note that we're actually making some changes in the auditing process. When we started, there was far less general guidance, and audits were not as frequent, and our initial plan offered the same process to all churches. But we found that we need to target things slightly differently. So as we reviewed the process, we've developed with IE a new one that enables every church to participate, but offers different products for different needs. When churches submit an enquiry form, some are recommended for a full audit with criteria that are quite similar. They're slightly different from the national. If it looks as if they have only one or two key questions, they can be recommended for a new product, a lower cost phone or Zoom consultation. And if an audit doesn't seem an appropriate thing for a very small, low-use church, they will get a follow-up call from a member of staff who can catch anything that might not have shown up in the application, direct them to the brilliant new national guidance, like the Practical Path, and also introduce our wider environmental program. We're also working on a strategy to use the energy footprint tool data and knowledge of churches to segment and target particular groups of churches with particular offerings. In terms of how we're targeting support for implementation, and that's as important as offering people the audit, obviously, we're seeking to do three things: to offer case studies and create support groups of similar churches, and to use the analysis that Catherine has shared to promote the quick wins and big wins that have already accessible solutions, and to join or create support structures so that we can offer easy access to guidance notes, supplies, and other materials for other key actions. On the case studies, we know that churches learn best when they learn from each other, and case studies are vital. The vicar of the church with the vestry switch brought the house down when he spoke at an Archdeaconry Day. So we're preparing videos and written case studies, and we're floating by churches the prospect of forming groups so that they can talk with each other about the particular challenges that churches like them face. Moving on to the question of how we're using the energy audit analysis for implementation, if we look at Catherine's chart of the most frequent recommendations, I've color-coded them to show what's in process, beginning, and still to come. The top two, marked in dark green, are both big wins that have near universal applicability, and for which procurement is simplified through parish buying. So we can and will encourage all churches, those who have had audits and those which haven't, to do these. The areas in light green are commonly identified, have significant savings implications, and have potential bulk purchase agreements to reduce the cost of implementation. We're looking forward to working with parish buying on these. The areas marked in orange are where we've identified gaps that needed to be filled. We're looking forward to new national guidance notes and working with the CBC to commission guidance on draft proofing. And some of these areas also require us to work on lists of trusted contractors. We're getting a lot of queries around solar, so we'll work with the National Church and our buildings department on this.
Miranda, can you wrap up quite quickly now, please?
And finally, those in red, which are the major forward priority, where we're looking at a large campaign that will get a sea change in the way we think about heating. These are our priorities. And I think it's worth saying finally that this has only been possible because of deep collaboration between the DAC, the Environment Programme, the Diocese of Oxford and IE, the National Church, and fellow dioceses. which have been wonderful partners. We look forward to continuing.